City of Stevens Point Housing Task Force meeting, recorded February 23, 2022.
In the interest of respecting everyone's time, I'll bang the vocal gavel. Wonderful. Thanks all for being here today. It is 3:17 according to my phone, and we do have a quorum. And Ryan, Director Kanowski is away today, and Adam Kuhn from the Community Economic Development Department is here representing that department and staff. So thanks for coming and managing the computer. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to do the roll call. So the only agenda item today is a presentation from Sue Wilcox and the ALICE report in Wisconsin, Portage County. So thank you guys for being here today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Is it possible to get the clicker, Anna?
Oh, maybe, yeah, that little.
Yeah, let me check and see if this works.
That makes it easy.
It always takes a second, yeah.
It'll be a very quick
This happened on Monday.
And city council.
It's like, yeah, I was like, lights down.
Got nothing.
I don't
We
think
have
it,
a lighter.
yeah, we tried that one yesterday, it wasn't working.
We have
Oh,
a
good.
lighter, a light if
A
that helps
laser
at all.
pointer.
A
No,
laser
that's
pointer.
okay. Can I just nod and?
Sure.
Okay. We'll do that. Well, we certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I did bring some very important people. This is May Nachman, who is our Director of Community Impact, and Fred Hebelwhite, our Director of Resource Development. We thought we'd bring some of the crew with us and talk with you about ALICE in Portage County. So I'll tell you what this is not. This is not a housing report that we're going to talk about today. Today is about financial hardship in Portage County, and housing most certainly is part of that conversation. But I do also want to mention I'm not a housing expert and not an economist either, but hopefully what this will do is provide you some information on what is happening to families in our county and how housing impacts their lives. So we'll get started. The next slide, please. So who is ALICE? ALICE is, and this is an acronym obviously, is Asset Limited. ALICE has no safety net in times of crisis. We'll go to the next one. Income constrained. ALICE income falls short of the essentials of paying for essentials. And employed. ALICE is working yet doesn't have enough. Traditionally, when we come and talk to groups, we talk about poverty, and we talk about those in poverty. What ALICE provides us is an opportunity to talk about people that are working each and every day, doing their very best, but are unable to make ends meet, and are at risk of not having that safety net that they need. Oops, I need to go back just one, Adam. So ALICE folks are folks that are working in our child cares. They're working at our hospitals. They're working at our restaurants. They're working in our schools. They're individuals that, again, are doing their very best to make ends meet, but are unable to do so. They are an essential part of our workforce. We need them. And they are very much a part of our everyday lives here in our county and in our city. Why United for ALICE? Why do we do this report? And by the way, this report is done in a traditional environment every 2 years. Last year we were unable to do it, and we'll have new numbers. You're going to find that some of the data that I'm providing you is a little bit older. But there's little concerns about the census data, the 2010 census data, so we're still working with that. But in 2022, we'll get some more information about ALICE, and in 2023, we'll have more county data that should be helpful as well. But the purpose of ALICE, by the way, we're one of 21 states that does this report. The whole idea is to increase awareness about financial instability in our communities, find solutions to improve financial stability, inform policies that will positively impact financial stability. This group is a perfect example of someone that should understand ALICE and the impact of housing in the lives of our ALICE families. It does provide us county-level data, which will be accessible by all. We share learning throughout the state. This report goes through our United Way of Wisconsin organization, so we learn from them what's happening around the state and how people are addressing the support needs for families. And then we can learn from other states as well, the other 20 states. What we're going to talk about is something called the household survival budget. These are the very basic and very essential expenses that families incur. It is around housing, and that's what you're all working on, food, transportation, health costs, and childcare, and cell phone or technology. And then we'll talk also in the household survival budget about miscellaneous and taxes, just a 10% increase. So this is what we call the Portage County ALICE survival budget. I'm going to have to look at it this way because it's a little bit easier to read. These are numbers, as I mentioned, these are 2018 numbers. And this is information that is targeted just for Portage County. And it's a budget that is the very bare necessities to live here in Portage County. So housing costs for a single adult would be about $520. I'm going to highlight two of the columns. One is the single adult, the other is 2 adults with 2 school-aged children. That cost for housing would be about $700. Can somebody tell me what's the average monthly rental in Stevens Point?
Of any rental?
Of any, is there a average?
I think the average 2-bedroom without utilities included is probably under 700. I think some of the new apartments will probably skew that, but I think about in that ballpark. I don't know, Ryan, if he was here, probably have, or I don't know if you have numbers.
Not specifically,
Okay.
but that sounds.
I would guess, 675 to 700, probably somewhere in that range.
So in this case, you're talking about 2 adults and 2 children, 2-bedroom could make it work, right? Child care costs would be 0 for a single adult, for 2 adults, 2 children. Say before or after school, child care would be about $511. If you go to the next right column, it's 2 adults and 2 children in daycare, child care. You know, that's about $1,300 a month, almost $1,400 a month for child care. Food, $270 for a single person, $937 for adults, and I won't go through each of these, but some of these that we know prices have increased significantly. Transportation, $326 a month, $795. Healthcare, that technology piece, you know, we have to remind ourselves that oftentimes families use their phones. There's, you know, many of them have gotten rid of landlines and are using that phone not only as a communications tool, but also as a computer, right? So there's really no way to exist without that phone anymore. Miscellaneous is a 10% increase on some of the costs, taxes. The monthly total for each of those areas is listed below in terms of the total expenses that a family could incur, the annual amount, and then the wage that that family or individual would need to earn to make those bare necessities happen. The big piece of this is these are 2018 numbers, right? And things have changed drastically. I did not dare just kind of come up with new numbers. There's actually a science to this, and I didn't try that. But we will talk about some of the increase in costs that families are incurring, you know, just based on the CPI in just a minute. The next, if you can go one more, Adam. Again, 2018 numbers, Okay, so there's two categories here that we talk about. We're talking about those that are in poverty, and in 2018, it was about 11%. And then we talk about ALICE, those families that are working, that are above the poverty level, but are barely, again, making ends meet. And so in this particular case, there's roughly 34% of Wisconsin families that are in that poverty ALICE scenario. And that's a significant number of people, right? So we want to pay attention to that. In Portage County, it was 13% in poverty and 19% of ALICE. And here's what's really interesting. Well, let me, before I go back to this, to the right-hand side, and I have printed sheets of this document. Oh, sure. Are the total number of households by area in our county and the percent of ALICE and those in poverty combined for our particular area. So again, 2018 numbers, Stevens Point had 44% of households were either ALICE or poverty. And you can take a look again by area of the county and see what that number is. But I'm cautioning you to do that because the numbers have changed drastically. And I'll go back to Portage County's numbers for poverty. In 2018, the number was 13%. We went and looked at the poverty number. It's now 8.3%. That's a significant reduction, but there's reasons for that. And May and I talked earlier today, there are a significant number of programs that are really helping families right now. Not saying they're going to be there for the long haul, but they're there right now. And I'll let May just talk about a couple of them.
Sure. We talked about some of the supports that have been provided, including increasing the allotment for food share. So you might know, some may know what food share is, but it used to be food stamps, and now it's food share. There was some as much as $90 per month increase in the maximum amount of allotment that's provided to families for food share. The child tax credit certainly contributed a lot to households and decreased that poverty level for families. Wisconsin Share, so that's the child care supplement program assistance. They increased a maximum of $190 per month for families, which affected about 98% of Wisconsin Share's families. So that's a huge increase. And that is still in existence. CAP Services did the Wisconsin Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or you might have heard it called WERA. They provided assistance to 948 individuals or 374 households. And it was, I think, somewhere around $1.3 million that came back into the community and to help those struggling with, to provide their rent, pay their rent and mortgage assistance. It also provided assistance with paying utilities. So, and then also the Badger Care program that provides health care for those who are unable to afford health care. It was, the enrollment had gone up considerably, but during the national health care emergency, no one is going to be terminated off of Badger Care until that national health care emergency. So all those things contributed to supporting families and having that poverty level decrease to that 8.3% level.
So we were at that 32% number combined, ALICE and poverty. We're now down to about 28%. That's a significant drop, but what you'll see is there is a correlation between the number of people that go from poverty to ALICE. So that's another thing to consider as we go through this. I just want to remind you about why we're having this conversation. It's trying to understand fully the implications of housing and the other essential expenses that families are dealing with that are impacted by their ability to have that house and that home. So that's why we're after this conversation today. If you wanted to go to the next one, Adam. This goes to that point that we made around how things are kind of inverted. So in 2016, there were fewer people that were in that poverty category, but the number of ALICE families went up. I can't promise you that that's the scenario today, but my guess is, yes, we're having a drop in the poverty level, but we're having numerous people in that ALICE categories trying to make their monthly bills. And part of that is what we're going to see in terms of expenses and how that has increased. Even though wages have increased, expenses have increased significantly. We can go to the next page, or next one. So just to give you an idea of the number of households impacted and who they are, the faces of ALICE as we put it. Combined, there's about 30% of households of single or cohabitating individuals in Portage County. Families with children, about 23%, and 65 and older, 43%. And I really want us to highlight the seniors because that is a significant number of households that are in that poverty and ALICE category for seniors. Just the total number of households, 29,000, over 29,000 households. Now, just so you know, a household is considered, there could be a number of college students living together. They would count just one of those people as a household. So college students are part of this conversation, but again, not in total number of college students, just by households. Okay. The next slide.
Do you have that data without the college students included?
We don't.
Oh, okay.
Because the data would include the census. Part of it comes from census and the Department of Housing, so.
Okay.
But that would be interesting info.
Just because most students don't have a ton of income, it'd just be interesting to see how the data would vary with and without them. Yeah.
Yes, agreed. And this slide suggests that, under the age of 25, the number of individuals in poverty is significant in terms of households, not individuals, and the number of ALICE. 25 to 44, it's broken down. 45 to 64, and then that 65 and over. Again, asking you to take a look at the number of households in each of these categories. Maybe part of your conversation about, who, as you consider affordable housing, what age group are you targeting? Who are you targeting for that particular project? Just a consideration. But I can't say this enough. I was shocked at that 65 and older number. In part because we assume every person 65 and older isn't working, and that's not the case. Some of the data, again, in 2018 was that over 20% in the state of Wisconsin were working. Now, that could drastically have changed because of COVID. Probably did. But that was a startling number as well. Okay, next slide if you would. Just a little bit around workforce trends. Again, forgive me, 2018 numbers. These, I bet, have changed drastically as well, right? Because things have changed around the labor force. But we couldn't get the numbers around the full-time salary breakdown, full-time hourly, and part-time hourly and part-time salary. Why I think this is helpful information, it takes into account the fact that you might be a full-time employee working as an hourly employee, but your hours might fluctuate greatly. And say we went through what we did with COVID and you get COVID and you can't work and you don't get paid. So you're dealing with a lot different stressors than most. So that number, when we can get the updated information, I think will be very helpful for us to understand who's in our labor force and what are their struggles as a result of maybe that full-time and even part-time hourly positions. It matters greatly. The other piece is the unemployment number here is 2.5. I think I looked and it's 2.8 right now, so it's pretty close to that 2018 number. And not in the labor force, I bet that's changed greatly, and the number of people that retired has probably changed. So something to look at in the future for all of us.
I'm sorry, what does not in the labor force mean exactly? Do we know?
Individuals that might be on disability,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you bet. Okay, thanks for the question. If you want to go ahead. This was so interesting to go and look at the Consumer Price Index. Again, these numbers were 2018, but the ALICE Essential Index is basically this. If you look at just those essential expenses and what ALICE has to pay against the Consumer Price Index, which includes all sorts of goods and services, right? Goods. They're different. And essentially, ALICE Essentials go up at a greater rate than that of the Consumer Price Index back in 2018. Again, not an economist. But if you look at some of the expenses that ALICE families are having to pay for, perfect example, the food costs, over 7% increase. Gasoline costs, this from January of 2021 to January of 2022. Gas costs, 40% increase. What I was startled by, the transportation costs of 5.6%. Think about what it would be like today if you were an ALICE family and you had to replace a used car. And number one, there's very few used cars, right? And the cost of those cars, according to the CPI index, is over 40% increase. So you're barely making ends meet, and the question becomes, how do you buy that car? And now there are services out there, but finding that car and then paying for it at a much higher rate than you normally would. You still have gas to pay. So that, remember in that survival budget, that transportation, that number has got to gone up significantly for families. So it's another expenditure that you got to have that families are struggling with. So I just went through this essentially, the CPI a year, January 21, January 22, an increase of 7.5%. I talked about food, gas, electricity. When you talk about housing, you know, the cost of housing is one thing in terms of what you pay for rent, but then you add on your electricity and your water bill, and you think about all those costs that you don't look at when you look at maybe rental without all the other utilities included. That's got to be part of the conversation for families. I talked about the used cars. I guess it goes unsaid, I keep harping on it, the housing is really driven up for ALICE in more urban and rural areas. Certainly it's impacted the city. Certainly it's impacted the outlying areas. Just to buy a house, rent a house, maintain a house. Very difficult for ALICE families. The cost of childcare continues to increase, and the loss of childcare options for families. So they're dealing with that as well as all the rest of this. Food insecurity, you know, that's been a long-standing problem and actually has been helped because of food share, but we're still seeing young adults and seniors needing food assistance, and many families needing food assistance. Because again, when we talk about ALICE, we're not talking about people necessarily on food share. They're individuals who may or may not be receiving assistance. They're going to the food pantries. We certainly heard it when COVID was occurring, where people were calling us at United Way saying, I've never had to ask for this. Can you help me with this assistance? So, again, people working.
Yeah, I was the guy at the office getting the mail each day during COVID, and that I've never had as many calls and having people say, I've never had to do anything like this. And they were just, beside themselves because of the hardships they were running into.
And some of those folks were and were not working, right? Because COVID impacted their employment. So, and then college students, this is more countrywide, facing challenges with meeting living expenses, right? We hear that in our community. An increased number of students that are working full or part-time to keep going. So, a couple of trends there. Some new tools. I want to encourage you that in the next, even this year, if you have time, consider going to the United Way of Wisconsin website and looking at ALICE online. Because it's a live dashboard that allows you to go into it and kind of break things down by the area that you live in and specific topics that you want to look at. And it's very interactive. There's also a simulation that you can do. It's called Making Tough Choices Simulator. That allows you to kind of go through what it's like to be making these choices. Do I pay for my food or insurance or childcare? Gives you real good hands-on experience. So consider doing that. This research center will provide you with a lot of information about the families, the document itself. Well, actually, we don't do the document. This used to be the document. It's now online. But it really does provide you with an enormous amount of opportunity. And next year, when we have that breakdown by community, it'll be really helpful for you all to see how many ALICE families are living in Portage County by community. I encourage you to look at that as well. The next one.
I was going to say, the one other thing we talk about when you look at the survival budget is often that we talk about choices that ALICE families have to make. And the one thing that became really evident during COVID is that many of these families have no dollars put aside. I mean, it's not like they could dip into retirement because their jobs, they haven't been at an income level where they've had either a retirement option or they've had enough that they could even save $50 a week or a month to put away. And it became really apparent that there's no safety net, there's no fallback. There were some opportunities, through government programs, once the additional weeks of unemployment came and some of those other programs that helped. But, as of December, most of those programs are done and it's like, okay, then it's the consideration of, okay, I'm back to making choices because, maybe I worked in the restaurant industry or another industry and those numbers of employees aren't back or the hours aren't there. So they're still having to make those tough choices of, when you talk about buying a secondhand car, but am I able to provide, my son wants to play hockey, and am I able to provide any of that kind of additional things, let alone ever taking in a movie or, going on a vacation or, there's no expendable income that they can put away because they just don't have it. So we continue to see that same struggle for ALICE families. Even though the economy's coming back, it's coming back in pockets and it's not the same across the state. So we're optimistic that things are going to get better, but it really does come down to, we always say, oh, you always have a choice, but not always. ALICE doesn't always have a choice.
Right. And, the work that you're doing around housing, it's just a critical piece for these families. It's critical because they need that home, right? So your decisions about that affordable housing piece, how many housing units are you going to have for individuals that are ALICE families in our community is a big question. I mean, I wouldn't begin to know what the answer is, but it's a critical piece. So, we wouldn't be United Way if we didn't come talk about our services. It's just what we do, you guys. It's just, Mark knows that. He's heard it enough. So, part of what we wanted to do to kind of wrap things up or answer any questions at the end, but was just some of the things that we're trying to do to support Alice families. So we'll just quickly go through those.
Sure. We're providing 2-on-1 services, which is our resource and referral line that we had, over 7,000 calls just during the time of COVID and beyond for people needing resources and referrals to other resources in the community. We support CAP Skills Enhancement Program, which is working to provide increase in financial stability for income eligible community participants. So they go there. CAP provides assistance with tuition, with books, potentially with childcare, so that individual can go back and further their education and increase their earning power. We provide a program sponsor a program called In a Fix, which is a partnership between Napa Auto Parts and our auto care centers. And it's a partnership that individuals who are working at least 20 hours a week or attending higher education can get $500 worth of assistance to have the car fixed so they can maintain their ability to go to work. So they can get a new muffler or new tires or those kind of things through that program. We fund CAP services in the VITA tax assistance program, which is free tax preparation and really supporting families to get that earned income tax credit. We also support a program, which is a new program for us, called Small Loans Big Difference, which is working to alleviate and refinance those high interest predatory loans that you'll see out there. And it also works to help rebuild credit, so those that have an opportunity to borrow pays less interest. So that's a new program which I really like. We have Meals on Wheels and the Rural Delivered Meals program for our seniors and disabled populations. It's not a fee-based program, it's a donation-based program, so based on their ability to pay, they're asked to contribute toward that, but really that cost of that meal can be between $8 and $8.50 a person, but if they can't afford to pay anything, they don't have to pay anything, but we still want to provide that nutritious meal to our elderly and disabled in the community. And then we also fund a program called Mental Health Navigator, which provides assistance to Alice families who are struggling with their mental health challenges. So we connect them to resources and to meet that need. And let's see, we also have developed a website called Peace of Mind Portage County, which is a great opportunity to learn about resources for them. If you're having a mental health challenge, you can go on there and take a screening, and it identifies what you might want to talk to a provider about if you're seeing these kind of concerns. And that's available 24/7. And go ahead.
Kind of want to recognize Mark. He was part of making the decision to move forward with that. Do you remember that, Mark? Yeah. Thank you.
We also sponsor some affordable childcare and school-age programs through the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and Child Caring to provide tuition assistance for those attending childcare centers. And that really helps Alice families be able to make ends meet. We also, through the Aging and Disability Resource Center, we sponsor or fund the Adult Day Center, which provides opportunities for those struggling that have a family member diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's, some kind of long-term disease. It gives them a break. They can continue their life. They can maybe continue working and contributing back into the community. We also provide facilitation of a program called the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. It's support that we get from FEMA. United Way does administer that program, and it provides funding to agencies who might do rental assistance, shelter, and food. And then a big part of what we did in the last probably year and a half, 2 years, is to administer the COVID Relief Fund. I think we gave out $625,000 to community members through agencies and programs that we fund. So a lot of different things that your contributions to United Way help us provide back to the community.
You know, and we live in an incredibly generous and very, very thoughtful community where nonprofits have done an incredible job. As we mentioned, just some of them, I can't tell you how rich we are and how fortunate we are to have these folks doing amazing work every day. And they really are there supporting those in poverty and Alice families get by. So that is Alice. We wanted you to know about folks that are doing their very best, but continue to struggle, and housing is a piece of that, a big piece of that. So we are encouraging you to carry on your work, and thank you for what you're doing. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you. Usually we follow up and have discussion and ask any questions if you guys are open and have the time for
Sure.
any further thoughts from the group. I'll open it up in case anybody does, both here or online. I had a question.
Sure.
So I can start it off. if
Yeah.
you're ready. Your data doesn't really differentiate between housing costs that are rent or mortgage. And I assume because a lot of the Alice population is asset limited, they probably either don't own a home or are unable to put together a down payment. Yet, one of the things that, you know, I understand from being a young person and many of my peers, but in these families and households, being unable to put together a down payment means that you're continuously in the cycle of paying rent rather than building equity. And so I see that as one of the ways to maybe shift that, and I wonder if you guys have any understanding of that within your population, both the younger households, maybe the older households, it's different, or how you see families struggling with that, I guess.
I don't have an answer for that, but it's a darn good question.
There are some really good programs out there through CAP with
Yeah.
the Down Payment Plus, and there's a couple other different down payment assistance that are all income-based. So there are some really good programs out there.
Yeah, I wonder if the Alice qualifies within that. I would assume
I would
they
too.
would be eligible,
I
but
think it's like 60,000 for a household. I mean, it depends on the
Yeah.
number of, but it's,
People and
the income threshold is high enough that I think, just going from memory of what those numbers are, that the Alice would qualify in those but those funds are typically exhausted. The last few years have been a little weird, but I mean, it used to be by July or August, those funds were exhausted for the year, and people were then waiting until the next spring
Okay.
for those funds to become available.
yeah.
And that's typically one of the type of things that when you call 211 and they have different needs, they're able to kind of direct them towards the community programs that provide services that may help them meet their needs. And I'm sure I know captures some of the things that 211 does. And they refer to them, so you're right, I think. But the fact that it's exhausted by August or July, you know, there's probably greater
Need, yeah.
Absolutely.
It'd be interesting to know where those funds come from too, if there's a way that it can be bolstered a bit. Who
Yeah, I'm
knows?
not sure. I guess I don't even know who administers those. I think it's a CAP program, but the Down Payment Plus, there's a couple different options. I'm not sure where those.
I think Bobby Joy's on your committee.
Mhm.
She might know.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always see that as just like, many times these households, obviously, if they're prioritizing, choose to pay rent. And most people I know pay their rent, but yet they are unable to qualify for a mortgage or just can never put together the pile that's necessary for the down payment.
Or they don't have the credit rating that they
Rating,
need,
yeah.
or
That's-
that an underwriter's gonna take, right?
Yep, yeah.
So there's a lot of different factors that keep them where they are.
Yeah.
And paying rent, you know.
But it does come back to just the availability of small starter homes, and a lot of those are also, when you take a look at the number of seniors that are entering, and as the baby boomers entered, I could turn 65 in 6 weeks.
Speaking of a baby boomer.
Tail end of the baby boomers, but you have a really large demand for a very small supply. There's just not a lot of entry-level housing, and I know that's something that this task force has been taking a look at. And that is a segment of the market, I think, that has to have some attention paid to it, because you're right. Rent, it's nice having the option to rent, but if any way possible, if you can purchase and your payments are going towards building equity, it's a huge factor in being able to get the
Stabilize.
financial well-being long term, so.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Looks like we got President Johnson has a question.
Oh, President, go ahead, President Johnson.
Hey, everyone. I had hoped to be there, but work kind of had another Zoom right up against this one, so sorry about that. Hey, May and Sue, thank you so much for the presentation. It's fascinating stuff. 2 questions. Do you know if there's ever been any sort of longitudinal study to evaluate ALICE people, families, individuals, and the length of time they may or may the length of time they stay in that role or exit the sort of income and asset limited, and then once they've left that category, how long does it take them to really become sort of financially and socially stable? So that's one question. I don't know if that exists, because in my experience, it's a long time from leaving poverty to moving into that income limited sort of scary zone to finally becoming, income stability. So don't know. And then the second question is, and it's more, if in your wildest dreams and hopes, and if we had a magic wand, this task force, to create 1 or 2 key recommendations, what would they be?
God, you ask tough questions, Elise.
Well, I think
That's because I know you guys are really smart.
Yeah, not that smart, not at all. I mean, to your first question, there hasn't been any of that study done to determine trends for families, and I think that would be a great idea. Unfortunately, having the resources to pay for it is another thing. So no, I don't have that. We don't have that. But I'll take it back to United Way of Wisconsin and see if there's anything that has ever been considered around that possibility. The second question.
I would say as you mentioned, to consider the elderly
Yes.
in the equation, for housing needs and future, that would be one of those.
I think the topic of first-time home ownership, I think that's huge, We want people to have the opportunity to have that home ownership, and that's a really tough one right now. I wish we did have a magic wand, I really do.
Yeah, I do. I do have a follow-up. Do we know, and you may not know this, I don't know if CAP Services we talked about the escalation in home prices, and boy, I'm looking for something not even affordable, but just finding anything on the market. But as it relates to that down payment assistance, it's wonderful, it's there. It does have some pretty broad parameters to help a wider range of families. But if that money isn't escalated based upon the price of what the market is, it's a nice idea, but it probably is going to push more and more people out of that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be fewer and fewer people that are going to be eligible for it. I mean, or not, they're going to be eligible, but they're not going to have the pool of dollars to provide that assistance.
Right.
So you're right. Based on what everything is costing now, there's going to be less people helped by it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth
Thank you.
looking into. I'm sorry that we don't have any of the answers, but.
Oh, no, you do, because you do have the answers, because you start by asking the questions.
Yeah.
And the questions are prompted by the data that you've presented. And while we don't have solutions, we're hope to move in that direction, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. If it was easy, right?
Say potential
Right,
solutions.
right.
Yeah.
Well, can I just chime in for like a potential solution that has been discussed at large with the community? This group has been sent an informational packet from Ryan Konoski about some strategies to enable better places and increase neighborhood affordability. And one of the recommendations in there is to implement or allow accessory dwelling units as a vehicle for allowing better aging in place and financial stability for families and entry-level homeowners. So Melissa Johnson, to your question of that, is a potential strategy that kind of tackles both of these concerns when thinking about the ALICE population and our older population as well.
And I'll add on to that. I haven't been super involved in that process, but I've seen some of the comments, and I think those comments always tend to swing back to, well, we don't want landlords doing this. As a landlord, I have no interest in that. The cost to build that structure
That's what we say.
is
usually.
it's just not possible for me. Like,
Right.
the people I know that would build those structures are people with family members or specific needs. I think the thought out there that landlords are gonna ruin the city by building all these accessory dwellings, it's just not possible. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know, I mean, if you guys ever need me to come speak at a meeting, like, I'm happy to come in and do that, because it's just not I don't know a single landlord who's even considered building an AD. Like, it's just not something that's going to happen. And
Travis, we're going to send you a special invite the next time that's on the agenda.
Oh, Melissa, it's Noah, but thank you.
Oh, it's Noah, sorry. I always get you two. No, I'll invite both of you. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Go ahead, Mark.
You know, the other thing that comes to mind is a lot of the ALICE families are, like you said, they're working. Part of it is the entry-level wages. If the minimum wage that I received, that was back when I started working, way back when, we were still pushing, we didn't have automobiles, but if it would have kept up with inflation, minimum wage would be around $15 an hour. When I started teaching, my beginning salary was $12,300. That $12,300, if it had kept up with inflation, would have been close to $50,000 right now. Teachers don't start at $50,000. Part of the problem is you have families now with 2 people working full-time, and they're ALICE families. Because the beginning wages aren't a living wage anymore. And that's a major issue that there are communities that have been able to take that on and have actually enacted ordinances with minimum wages that supersede their state and federal. I'm not sure that that's doable in this area, but ultimately, that's a step that has to be considered, because when you have people working 40, 45 hours a week, 2 people working, and you're still an ALICE family, I think something has to be done.
Any other thoughts or questions for presenters? Yeah, I just wanted to mention too, the elderly population number really did stick out. The Edgewater Manor being in my district and the closing of that, I know affected many of those residents greatly, in part because the cost of it was something that is really unmatched in the community. And now as part of that, that was the discussion was, where do we go to continue to create those units that are available in this community, because the need isn't going away. So that's definitely been on the forefront of my mind as part of this. So
Great.
yeah.
Just to add on to Mark's comment, when I started at United Way back in 2006, I remember there was that might have been 2007, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal highlighting Portage County as the highest number of dual income households, and there was some other information there, but the fact that we are that high in dual income households in this county, and we still have this high of numbers as far as ALICE and poverty, is rather telling.
It's not because of a lack of work ethic. They're working, and we do, we're blessed with that, but it's not necessarily, hard work isn't necessarily in and of itself sufficient to get yourself out of that Alice situation.
Thank you for all you guys are doing.
Thank you for your time today. I'll send out a reminder of the homework for the members of the task force in case you haven't gotten to Lisa or Ryan your 2 goals and some strategies. That was on our homework list for last week as we begin to put together the recommendations and discuss goals and strategies for the housing task force. I'm sure all the people here have done their homework.
We've got, we got
the-
quite a few, but not from everybody. You still got time.
So I'll put that out there, and yes, thanks for your time, everybody, and I suppose we'll adjourn here. I don't see any digital hands either, so 4:07. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.